deal. United States authorities condemn Iran for arming Yemen's Houthi rebels. Gaza, UN details effects of new Israeli offensive. Ukraine, Russian missiles blast children hospitals. Australia, police search for elusive teenager for manslaughter.
From the line across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring on-the-spot news, live analysis, expert discussions on trending stories in politics, business, socio-economy, sports, and documentaries. So catch all the updates on the happenings around the globe. Stay focused on the fact today, only on ATN.
Every day our lives are changed by history.
We are one people, all of us.
Leaders, politics.
Nobody's ambition is what they blood.
I have fought very firmly.
Natural occurrence, war, and the world economy.
I belong to everybody, and I belong.
Intention to terminate its plan to deport. That the deal had been initiated by the UK to address the crisis of irregular migration affecting the UK, a problem on plans by the UK's new Labour Party government to cancel the scheme, which drew criticism from human rights watchdog and others as a cruel and inhumane. It was not clear if Rwandan authorities were reacting to press reports or had been given official notification of plans to terminate the agreement. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said in his news conference Saturday that the Rwandan deportation plan was dead and buried before it started. Starmer denounced it as a gimmick, though it is unclear what he will do differently, as a record number of people have that the 2022 shooting death of a Pakistani journalist by police in Nairobi was unlawful and unconstitutional, a lawyer and his family said. Justice Stella Muktuku, in the ruling in Nairobi, also faulted Kenya's Attorney General and the Director of Public Prosecutions for laxity in investigating the shooting of Rashad Sharif after police opened fire at his car at a roadblock checkpoint. Sharif's family has accused an elite Kenyan police unit of intentionally killing Sharif. The 50-year-old journalist had fled Pakistan earlier that year to avoid arrest at home on charges of maligning Pakistan's national institutions. A panel of Pakistani investigators in December executed to file a case against 2 officers suspected of fatally shooting Sharif at the roadblock. The killing shook Pakistan, and days later, thousands came out for Sharif's funeral. Pakistan has said no state institution was involved in his death. Sadiq, who filed a complaint against Kenyan police together with Kenyan journalists' unions, said although she knew that her husband would not come back, now everyone knows that he was killed intentionally. Police blamed the shooting on mistaken identity during a search for a similar car involved in a her husband, Aviv, was killed in the attack. The White House said in a statement that Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, between Israel and Hamas over a U.S.-backed proposal to the region for the talks. Of militants who had regrouped there, sending thousands of Palestinians fleeing on Monday from an area ravaged in the early weeks of the 9-month-long war. Hamas warned that the latest raids and displacement in Gaza City could lead to the collapse of long-running negotiations over a ceasefire and a hostage release after the 2 sides had appeared to have narrowed the gaps in recent days. Israeli troops were again battling militants in areas that the army said had been largely cleared months ago in northern Gaza. The military ordered evacuations ahead of the raids, but Palestinians said nowhere feels safe. Hundreds of thousands were packed into sweltering tent camps. Israel ordered the evacuation of northern Gaza in the first weeks of the war and has prevented most people from returning. But hundreds of thousands of Palestinians remain living in shelters or the shells of homes. We fled in the dark militant group is eliminated. Post-war governance and security control of the enclave have also been contentious. People, mostly civilians and abducted at all times. Israeli restrictions protect the Palestinians as it examines genocide allegations against Israeli leaders. Israel strongly denies the charges. The United Nations said Monday that Israel's latest evacuation orders for parts of Gaza City affects more than 60 schools sheltering displaced Palestinians, as well as 2 partially functional hospitals, 6 medical points, and 2 primary health care centers. The evacuation orders came as Israel deepens its offensives in pursuit of militants who had regrouped in the heavily damaged city. Thousands of Palestinians have fled in recent days after being attacked on. His father, Salah Abed, detailed the attack in a Facebook post without saying who was responsible. Amer Balisha, a friend of the activist, said more than 20 masked men attacked him. He said that when bystanders intervened, the attackers fired shots in the air and claimed to be from Hamas's internal security. There was no comment from Hamas. Amin Abed had helped organize protests in 2019 over the harsh economic conditions under Hamas rule and taxes it imposed, under an Israeli anti-Egyptian blockade since Hamas seized power in 2007. More recently, he has criticized Hamas's October 7 attack into Israel that triggered the war, which has brought unprecedented devastation and hunger to the Palestinian territory. The Hamas-run police, which maintained a high degree of public order before the war, have lost control across the territory. Criminal gangs and other armed groups have exploited the breakdown of law and order, robbing aid convoys and further complicating humanitarian efforts. Head of the main UN agency providing aid to Gaza says half its facilities in the territory have been destroyed since the war began. Felipe Lazzarini also said more than 500 people have been killed in those attacks, including employees and displaced people sheltering there. The Commissioner General of the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees spoke at a news conference with Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati, who reiterated Egypt's support for the agency known as UNRWA. Israel has accused UNRWA of turning a blind eye or collaborating with Hamas and other armed groups in Gaza and of perpetrating the decades-old Palestinian refugee crisis, accusations the agency denies. UNRWA provides basic services to millions of Palestinian refugees from the 1948 war surrounding Israel's creation and their descendants, who make up a majority of Gaza's population. Israel's top general in the West Bank spoke out against settler violence in the occupied territory, a rare public denunciation of settler military's central command. Major General Yehuda Fox said the nationalist crime had recently reared its head. Under the auspices of the war and the desire for revenge, it sowed chaos and fear in Palestinian residents who did not pose any threat, Fox added. Fox's statement came after a week of particularly intense attacks on Palestinians in the volatile territory. Videos obtained by the Associated Press showed Israeli forces representing the families of Israeli hostages held by Hamas in the Gaza Strip urged Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Monday to postpone his speech to the U.S. Congress until a deal to release their relatives is signed. Netanyahu is to deliver a speech to a joint session of Congress on July 24th. Israel and Hamas are currently engaged in some of the most serious talks in months on an agreement that would halt the war in exchange for the release of hostages, as well as hundreds of Palestinians imprisoned by Israel. The hostage families group called on Netanyahu to prioritize a deal before he travels abroad. A speech without concrete action to seal the deal and bring our loved ones home is premature and misses the mark of this war's top priority, the return of all the hostages, it said in a statement. Families of hostages have grown increasingly frustrated with Netanyahu and his government's inability or unwillingness to bring the captives home. Protests across the country on Sunday demanded that Netanyahu nail down a deal that would free the hostages and call for his resignation. The impatience was also felt Monday when the brother of one hostage was forcibly removed from a parliamentary committee meeting. Video showed about half a dozen security guards dragging Danny Elgarat by his arms and legs as an uproar erupted in the room, with participants shouting, "Shame on you." Elgarat was asked to leave the room after arguing with another relative of a hostage and accusing the committee chairman and ultranationalist lawmaker of funding a marginal hostage family advocacy group that opposes stopping the war in exchange for releasing the captives, Israeli media reported. An unauthorized gold mining area on Indonesia's Sulawesi island, killing at least 23 people. More than 100 villagers were digging for grains of gold on Sunday in the remote and hilly village of Bolango when tons of mud plunged down the surrounding hills and buried their makeshift camps, said Herianto, head of the Provincial Search and Rescue Office. Rescuers recovered more bodies on Tuesday in the devastated hamlet where the gold mine is located. Improved weather allowed us to recover more bodies, said Herianto. Sniffer dogs were being mobilized in the search released by the National Search and Rescue Agency.
From the line across the ocean to the land beyond the mountains, through the Sahara, we bring on-the-spot news, live analysis, experts on trending stories in politics, business, socio-economy, sports, and documentaries. So catch all the updates on the happenings around the globe. Stay focused on the fact today, only on ATN.
Every day our lives are changed by history.
We are one people, all of us.
Leaders, politics,
Nobody's ambition is what the blood.
I have fought a very family.
natural occurrence, war, and the world economy.
I belong to everybody, and I belong to nobody.
ATN covers it all on ATN Politics today.
So you no guarantee safe delivery.
We just dey vote for government, but we not get good governance at all. Road so e no dey, light o usai, the infrastructure nko e come turn to be forbidden fruit for the city.
Corruption spoil everything. Hello?
Hello, madam. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Mrs. Ayeni. I am calling from the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs.
Okay. Okay, I will.
Now my body network there.
I can't hear you. Network is bad.
Madam, we can hear you. Continue.
Support from Atlantic Television Network.
Corruption not in my country.
154 others, including in various locations, including a children's hospital in Kyiv. Zelensky met with Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk in Warsaw to discuss further support for Ukraine from NATO, as well as signing a bilateral cooperation and defense document. We would like to see greater resolve in our partners and hear resolute responses to these attacks. Zelensky told a joint news conference, stressing that Ukraine will take its own retaliatory steps. I can see a possibility for our partners to use their air defense systems in a way to hit the missiles that are carrying out attacks on our country, Zelensky said. Zelensky stopped in Warsaw en route to a NATO summit, which begins Tuesday in Washington, marking the Western Defense Alliance's 75th anniversary. Leaders are expected to discuss ways of providing relief. At the start of the news conference with Tusk, Zelensky asked those gathered to observe a moment of silence for the victims of Monday's airstrikes. The two leaders signed a cooperation and defense agreement that spells out Poland's continued support for Ukraine in defense, especially air defense, energy security for Ukraine, and Poland's participation, Zelensky said. Did not and ask Lukashenko for mercy, Sabelka said.